This is the Power Break Podcast number 206, titled The Price of Procrastination. Hi, everyone. I'm Bob Brubaker, along with JT, as we hope you'll stay tuned as we seek to give you a little power in this break to help you succeed in the race of life.
This is the Power Break Podcast with a focus on the spiritual, the mental, and the physical aspects, all to help you succeed in the race of life. For show notes from today's podcast, go to bobbrubaker.com and follow the link for the Power Break Podcast. What's going on with you, man?
Well, here we are recording. It's good to be able to record again. This program is released on the 12th of July. Here we are in July, JT.
July.
Can you imagine this? Can you imagine this year is just going by so quickly?
Yeah, it is.
I guess that's a sign of age. It's a sign of age, isn't it?
Well, you know, we did talk about counting our days not too long ago. So, yeah, they feel like they're going a lot faster now that you pointed that out. Thanks.
That was how to get the most out of every
For
day.
sure. No, it was a good conversation. I'm messing with you.
Let's thank the listeners for joining us for the Power Break Podcast today, and for coming back to the Power Break Podcast, and for telling others about the Power Break Podcast, and for leaving us a rating and or a review wherever you download the podcast. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's so important, you know, when we talk about algorithms and stuff like that, you know, about what causes people to find podcasts and not, and there's so many out there being done. But a 5-star rating helps. It helps tremendously. And whatever comments you can add, that'd be fantastic. But if you found that this podcast has helped you in any way, I would just encourage you to just do a real simple 5-star and help other people find the podcast. But we are so grateful for our listeners. They've been so good to us.
That's right. But we also encourage you not to put it off, because then you would be procrastinating.
That is true. That is definitely true. And we are going to talk about all the reasons why you should do that 5-star right now.
Yeah. So we're talking about the price of procrastination. So JT, what do you think of when I say that name of that title, the price of procrastination?
Well, I mean, the word procrastination is just so incredibly American to me. Like, I almost grew up with the saying of, you know, why do today what you can easily do tomorrow. And, you know, as far as being successful, everybody who knows if you want to be successful in everything, this is your biggest enemy. And there's a price that is paid for that. And, you know, from a spiritual perspective, I heard a sermon that was done by Pastor Chris Stevens down at Skycrest Community Church in Clearwater, Florida. And really, he talked about how this is one of Satan's favorite weapons and is most effective, to get it to where Christians will say, I know I should, but I'll just do that tomorrow. I'm not going to do it today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. It's not that big of a deal. We can do it later. That's the biggest weapon that Satan uses to keep us from being effective for the kingdom. So, you know, his sermon was excellent. I'm pretty sure you can find it online if you have any interest in it. But that's what comes to mind for me. How about you?
Well, procrastination is something that we all battle, as you mentioned, and because of that, many times we do have some legitimate reasons for putting things off as we assess what we're supposed to be doing and then make priorities. But most of the time, I would say we're probably guilty of just putting things off because we're creatures of comfort and we don't want to give up the present state of being comfortable.
Yeah, that's 100% true. Yeah, 100% true.
Now listen, here's what it says in Ephesians chapter 5. He says, therefore, it says in the Bible, awake, O sleeper, arise from the dead, and Christ shall shine on you. And he says, look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. Wake up. It's time not to procrastinate. Don't put it off, and just get to the business at hand. The price of procrastination is what we're talking about, JT.
Man, let's continue to talk more about that as we turn to your article. But first, let me just encourage people to get over to bobbrubaker.com and check out all the resources. There's a ton of books. There's a ton of articles. At the very least, you could sign up for the blog. The blog will show up every Monday and get you set for the Power Break podcast later on in the week. So I would encourage you to absolutely get over there and check out all those resources. But let's continue to talk more about your current article, which is The Price of Procrastination.
Well, JT, do you ever procrastinate?
Oh my gosh, man. You know, it was like, as usual, God's using you to remind me that I need to stop something. And this time it's procrastination because, so this is kind of a long story, but I'll make it as short as possible. We bought an RV. I was unaware that our association rule said that the RV, if it was on property, it couldn't be seen from the road. I didn't know that. Truth be told, you know, I should have read the covenants. I should have understood them, but there's so many trailers in this neighborhood. I didn't think that they separated out trailers from RVs, which they did. But anyway, long story short, I'm in the process of building a parking spot at the back of our property for it. And I'll get going for like a couple of days, and then I'm like, that's enough work for the week. And then I procrastinate, and then I don't get going again for another week. And, you know, it's funny because Amy showed me the notes from the from the association meeting, and they were talking about RV issues. And I'm like, that's me. That's me.
Oh,
I'm
goodness.
the reason why, you know. And regardless of whether I think that, you know, our property is spotless. Besides that, I think it's one of the best maintained. But the simple truth is I've been procrastinating with that parking spot, and you come up with this to kick me in the butt and get me going. So as usual, thanks. Anyway.
I'm glad to be of service to you, JT.
So no, I never procrastinate, Bob, ever.
The point is we all do procrastinate, and be sure there are three things. Just think of three things that you've been meaning to do, right? I finished this article, by the way, and I was putting off changing a light in one of our bathrooms. So
yes.
I finished the article, and I went and put a new light in.
Good for you,
and
man.
It was a shock that I did that. Anyway, maybe it's an email response that somebody needs that you've been meaning to send weeks ago. We all have that list, and for some reason it's easier to pass it off than it is just to do what we need to do, and that's called procrastination. So the question is, why do we procrastinate? Now, many experts feel we procrastinate because there's a perfectionist in all of us that where we are putting things off because we just can't see how to get it done in such a high standard. That may be true, but it's also a matter of comfort. Another expert says it may be a matter of priorities and what makes us feel uncomfortable. If we arrange our priorities and really have a good feel for what is important, then we'll feel more uncomfortable about putting things off than the perceived discomfort in just doing the task. Perfectionism, priorities, or just plain procrastination, it all has a great price because if you put it off, what you're doing and the things you should be doing, you lose out. And it may be a matter of not of just wanting to deal with something right at the moment that makes you feel uncomfortable, or it could be a matter of just not having the priorities in order. But when you put things off, you lose. Often people around you and those close to you also bear the brunt of your putting things off. The price of procrastination goes far beyond the action or lack thereof. The book of Proverbs calls it being a sluggard. The sluggard says, there's a lion in the road. There's a lion in the streets. As a door turns on its hinges, so does the sluggard on his bed. The sluggard buries his hand in the dish, and it wears him out to bring it up to his mouth. The sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can answer him sensibly. It sounds silly.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, it does.
That's the procrastinator, okay? The sluggard in the book of Proverbs is really the person that's procrastinating. That's why it says a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a robber and want like an armed man. So what can you do to overcome procrastination? Listen to the psalmist. He says, I hasten to do and not delay to keep your commandments. Hasten, getting action, busy. That means that you want to overcome procrastination. Discipline yourself to jump on things right away. That could mean that when you think of things or are told of things to do, that you hasten to add it to a list. Because it's on a list, you're more apt to do it. And if it's ever before your eyes, you take the steps in completing the project. If it's not on a to-do list, it's more likely to be not to be done or put off. So the first steps be taken to completion. Then you have the momentum to completing the project. You're in motion, of course, and the psalmist above hastened in keeping the commandments of God. Granted, that's a lifelong project, but so is hastening was getting into action. So just think about it. In the book of Proverbs, it says, just go to the ant. Look at the ant. There's no chief, there's no officer, no ruler. The ant prepares bread in the summer and gathers food in the harvest. It's just not good to be a procrastinator.
No, it's not. And it's funny because for me, it's all about it's never the things that you want to do that you procrastinate, ever. It's always the things in your head where you're like, that's going to really stink. I know I have to get it done, but I'm not going to enjoy it. And I think that in and of itself is probably the attitude for me personally that needs to be fixed. It's the perspective of looking at things. Amy said something about, we were talking about the parking space and she goes, you just don't seem to be into doing a bunch of work around the house. And I was like, honestly, Amy, I've done that with every house we've ever owned. I have gutted it and rebuilt the thing, made it beautiful and then sold it and then started the whole process over again. It's like, yeah, I don't have any desire to I bought this house because I didn't think anything needed to be done to it. But, so yeah, I think it's a priority thing. It's absolutely a priority thing. I won't forget to pray. I won't forget to do my my scripture reading. I won't forget to devote time. I won't forget to practice for worship. I won't forget any of those things. But man, I'll procrastinate the heck out of building a parking spot. I'll tell you that right now.
So JT, tell me how you just picture yourself with that completed project. How would you feel?
Oh, I feel fantastic that it was done. You're absolutely right. And focusing on the prize is what I need to do. And at the very least, it'll make Amy happy, which should be more than enough for me to do that. So, but whatever. Yeah.
Well, folks, check out the article. It's called The Price of Procrastination. The blog is found at bobbrubaker.com. Check it out today.
So what else is happening, Bob? Anything else you want the listeners to know about?
Probably a place to talk about the power of time management, the little book I wrote on time management several years ago, and some biblical principles around that. The power of time management, you'll find it at bobbrubaker.com. And while you're there, check out the sermon links of the sermons I preach here at Christ Community Presbyterian Church in Clearwater, Florida. Presently going through the summer series in Psalms, looking at we started in Psalm 75. We're going through Psalm 87 this summer. So check it out. It's really good stuff there. There's several laments and how to lament and even lamenting for the country. So it's all found at bobbrubaker.com, the books and also the sermon links. Check it out today.
This is the Power Break Podcast. I'm JT along with Bob Brubaker, and this is time on the podcast for questions and answers. If you have a question for me or for Bob, feel free to email me at jt@bobbrubaker.com, and we'll get to answering that on an upcoming Power Break podcast. Are you ready for question number 1?
Fire away, JT. Let's talk about it.
I'm going to fire away then. All right. So how is it that we pay the price spiritually when we procrastinate? I love this topic because I think all of us at some point in our spiritual walk have experienced this.
You're absolutely right. And, we talk about it every time when we say discipline makes the difference in all aspects of life. And that means when you're disciplined in one area, it spills over to another area and over to another area. And it seems that whole aspect of discipline does make a difference in all aspects of life. On the contrary, procrastination takes its toll. on all aspects of life. So when you procrastinate in one area of life, it spills over to other areas of your life. And pretty soon you find yourself a procrastinator in all areas of your life, which is not what you want to do. Again, from Ephesians chapter 5, that we're to awake because we have a tendency to sleep on things, and look carefully how we walk, and not as one unwise, but as wise. And we do that by making the best use of the time. And that means the physical, the spiritual, our family life, our relationships, our reputation. It all has an effect when, we go through instead of being disciplined, then it has an effect upon us when we're procrastinating. And that's why in the book of Proverbs it says, Solomon writes and says, I passed by the field of a sluggard and by the vineyard of a man who lacks sense. And he says, behold, it was overgrown with thorns. The ground was covered with nettles, and its stone was broken down. Then I saw and considered, and I looked and received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a robber, and want like an armed man. Whoa.
Yeah, well,
so,
that's right.
One area of life, when you're focused on discipline in one area of life, it spills over. Next thing you know, you'll be more disciplined in other areas of your life. That's why sometimes we talk about the physical. It's not a small thing. It's, when a person I realize it can easily become a god and take over in your life. But, when you're training and you're physical in one area of life, you find a way to get things done, and you find a way to be disciplined in other areas of life. But also the constant battle is being undisciplined or procrastinating in one area of your life, and that can also spill over into other areas of your life too.
Yeah, discipline really is the thing, because it's whenever there's a slow fade in my spirituality or in my relationship with God or relationship with my wife or whoever it is, it usually starts with a lack of discipline as far as paying attention to that. Because if you want anything to grow, it needs to be pruned. You need to pay attention to it. You need to focus on it. You need to give it its due. So really discipline is the key. Like for me, when I start to feel like I'm further away from God, it's usually no surprise to find out that my discipline had slacked when it came to prayer or devotional time, or putting time in, volunteering or whatever it is that you do. So I really think that is the key, is really staying focused and staying disciplined. And that brings us into question number 2. So from the mental aspect, how can we mentally keep from falling into the trap of procrastination?
I think the best thing to do is having a plan so we don't procrastinate. The plan, of course, comes around a to-do list. I know people hate the to-do list. They feel like it's governing them. But, that way you don't let things just drop through the cracks. When you have something to do, you put it on your to-do list. And anything that's not accomplished today, then you put it on the to-do list for tomorrow. And when you're disciplined about that, it's ever before your eyes. And especially when you see things that are reoccurring, like they're always coming up today, tomorrow, the next day. Oh, I'm procrastinating on something. Maybe I just do it. And then, of course, if you prioritize, including the writing down, maybe even a time that would take to do this, or, I guess the next thing is actually when you make a plan is to break it down into bite-sized pieces. Like, let's say if you made a plan, JT, on that parking space for your RV, you have to cut it into, there's a certain amount of digging there, right?
Oh, yeah. I've already gotten almost all the digging done. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. I'm in the process now of building the railroad tie walls, and those, honestly, the procrastination is those things weigh 200 pounds. And I'll after I move like 2 of them, I'm like, oh man, I'm wrecked. So that's probably, yeah. So that's part of it.
Well, it's okay. Okay, so when you break things down, you make it down in bite-sized pieces, and then have an estimation of how long those things take. And so you say, when a person has to, like if I have a writing project, it's if I give 20 minutes to this, see what happens, and So just, like, and if I give it 5 more minutes, how far can I get? Next thing you know, you're on a place where you're almost finished with something, and you can see the momentum just take you on.
Yeah, right.
So there's a plan of action, also a plan of breaking things down, and also prioritize when you have, what is important, and so you're keeping to what you say is important in your life, and or as the old guy says, keep the main thing, right? And then, of course, practice. Just stop and think about it, JT. The guy that you go to as your lawyer is actually a practicing attorney.
Gosh, I hope so.
Your doctor. You go to your doctor. He's a practicing physician, right? He's in a practice. So we're all practicing.
I always laughed about that because you can't practice law enforcement. You're expected to be right or wrong all the time.
Yeah.
I got another wrong profession. I can tell you exactly who's practicing up here is the guy that says whether it's going to rain or not. But I would imagine the mountains really make it difficult for him to figure that out. But.
Well, I suspect it's also where he's located versus where you're located.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That there's difference. Those mountains make a difference in the weather patterns. Of course, here in Florida, they could say it's a 20% chance of rain. It may be raining 6 feet from you, but not on you.
Yeah, that's the crazy part. Is it's so segmented when you're. It's not like that up here. Either it's raining or it's not. Like I can't drive out. I guess I could drive out of the rain, but I'd have to drive a while to do it.
Yeah.
But, yeah. No, I agree with you, man. Making a plan is important. That's, but what if you procrastinate to make the list?
You have to understand that it only takes like 10 minutes to make the list, right?
It does, yes.
Yeah. That's those little things like, it's just a small thing, but it's so easy to procrastinate. I know I should be doing that, but when I'm going to write an article or something, I write down just some basic points and kind of write an outline, and that takes very little time. But it's amazing how it's so easy to put it off.
Yeah, for sure. No, 100%. I agree, and really, discipline. This is one of the main places where discipline really makes a big difference, and. Remembering that there's a price to procrastination. I think a lot of people just don't look at that there's a price. That there is, if you procrastinate, it affects you for sure, but it certainly can affect many of the people around you. And it certainly, when it comes to spirituality, it can affect your relationship with God, how close you feel, how distant you feel. There's a lot of things that go into that. But a lot of people don't think there's a price to it because they think, I'll just do it tomorrow. It's not that big of a deal. So that day they don't feel like there's a price to it. But I promise you there is. And we don't.
There was a man that his kids were over to our house one time when we had the pool over here, and they were swimming in our place, and the dad was supposed to pick them up, and he was late, and the kids made the comment, he's late about everything.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a sad moment for me to hear that because just because what he was doing was he taught his kids that he was a procrastinator, and that's the way he is.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yes, so part of the price that you pay is that other people pick up on your procrastination too.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's move on to question number 3 from the physical side of life, and I love this one because man. I already know the answer is yes. But how important are inspirational stories for physical training?
Well, stop and think about it. When you hear the stories of people accomplishing great things, it gives you hope that, if they can do it, we can do it. In the book of Romans, chapter 15, it says the things written aforetime were written for our learning, that we through the patience and the comfort of the Scriptures might have hope. Well, that happens in life too, and we hear stories of people accomplishing things. It also helps us in the area of visualization. Sometimes we can't see ourselves doing something, but when we read these stories of people that have done great things or accomplished great things, we kind of see ourselves doing that. And of course, it's encouragement. And kind of see yourself as being that person. Maybe not exactly the same. I realize, like you and I were in the era of Lance Armstrong, and even though people have all kinds of things to say about him, but there was some great accomplishments that he did. And, when everybody was riding, they were riding like Lance,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was like, or I want to be like Mike, or, yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stories like that. There's actually a guy in downhill racing that his name is Brooke McDonald. And Brooke McDonald, during a race, paralyzed himself from the waist down.
Ew.
And Brooke McDonald, that was 2 years ago. And Brooke McDonald was told he probably was not going to walk again. And currently, Brooke McDonald is back to being one of the top 20 riders in downhill racing, just through perseverance and through just an incredible mindset and attitude. And to say that that's not inspirational you'd be fooling yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And he videotaped a lot of it, and his girlfriend just said plainly, she said, he's the most positive human being I've ever known in my life. And if he made any ounce of progress that day, he celebrated it. And he used it as motivation for the next day and the next day and the next day. So to go from being told you're not going to be able to walk again to being a high-level World Cup rider again, that's pretty amazing stuff, So
that is, yeah.
And for every Brooke, there's probably a ton of Brooke McDonalds out there in every sport. And yeah, it just reminds us, there probably wasn't a lot of procrastination on his part when it came to trying to get back to being able to walk again.
That's right. Yeah. But it just pays off just to read stories.
Yep.
Because we see ourselves there and say, well, if they can do it, we can do it. So it pays off.
Yeah.
Inspirational stories.
Well, I also think, I just want to give a shout out to you real quick, and it'll be real quick. But when you got your knee replacements done, man, you were back on it. I mean, to the point to where your doctors were like, okay, you're way past where you should be. Either you need to slow down or this is fantastic. But you were always ahead of the curve, and you were always motivating yourself to get up, get the exercises done, do what you were supposed to do, and get back in the game. And you even prepared for that downtime by getting in really good shape prior to going into those surgeries. That's some inspirational stuff, buddy. It was cool. It was awesome to watch, at least for me to watch. It was like, I remember the guy right next to you that actually worked at the city of Largo that I knew. That guy wasn't getting out of bed the way you were and trying to walk around that hospital floor. But you, man, you were like, yep, I'm up, I'm going. I even got a video of it for proof.
Yeah, that was, I thank the Lord for that. The Lord gave me a great desire to move. And, both of them I recovered faster than anybody else had ever done that. And that's not trying to set a record of myself. I was just wanting to get back on the bike and get to moving again. And so my doctor, he rode with me the first time. I think it was, I forget how many weeks back, that after the total knee replacement, that we rode 70 miles together. So pretty good.
It was pretty good. And he's probably just scratching his head. Yeah. But pretty inspirational, man. Good stuff.
Inspirational stories will really help pay off in your physical training, so don't neglect them. It does take discipline to find them and read them and take note of them. But as we mentioned, that discipline does make the difference in all aspects of life. So check out today's show notes at bobbrubaker.com. Click on the Power Break podcast. Today is show number 206.
And submit your questions by email to jt@bobbrubaker.com and listen to our answer on an upcoming Power Break podcast.
Quick word for The Power of Time Management, the book we're talking about as we talk about procrastination. The Power of Time Management. You can find the book at bobbrubaker.com.
Well, thank you for joining us for the Power Break podcast. Please subscribe and leave a review wherever you've downloaded the podcast. And check out show notes, news, Bob's weekly blog, and other cool things at bobbrubaker.com. And follow, I was going to tell you to follow the link, but you shouldn't do that. You should just listen next time for the Power Break podcast.